Hello, my name is Rohit Talisa and welcome to my YouTube channel. So in last video, I explained you about the project structure of Rails. In this video, we'll do some basic coding and understand the overall MVC architecture. Now I'll start with the question, but before doing that, let me show you the code, and inside that I want you to understand a couple of things. First, for this particular project, this gem file is important to us. That's one. I did mention it in last video also, but repeating some of the things. Gem file is important. Great. This DB folder is important because database related things will get done here. So two things. Config related is important, three things. Okay. And especially in config, routes.rb file is really important. So three things basically inside config. I'm not going in depth of it. We will use other things also. But I just want to be clear that routes.rb is important. Okay. And in app folder, overall app folder is definitely important. But in this specifically, controllers, JavaScript, models, and views. These four are important. Okay, assets up to a certain extent and helpers up to a certain extent. Okay, so you have understood what all things are important. Okay, to summarize this: app folder, config, database, and gem file. Great. Now, if I create a particular URL for my project, for example, localhost /3000 colon 3000 /users. Okay. Now in that, I want to show some page. What all things will be important? Okay. If you remember the MVC architecture, based on that, try to answer this question. If I want to hit a particular URL which should show a particular UI, what all things are important for us? Okay. So if you remember the MVC architecture, I mentioned that controller is definitely important, view is definitely important, right? Because browser will send request to controller and controller will decide which view to show. Okay. Along with that, how will browse? There can be multiple controllers. So how will browser know which controller to hit? For that, we use routes file. Okay. So now let's focus on one single task. We want to show on home page, we want to show hello world. That's it. Okay. So let's focus on this. So for that, what is the home page? Home page is this URL, right? So let's try to use this URL in routes. So we'll go to config, go to routes. Okay. And here you can mention requests like push, post, destroy, patch, those kind of things. Get, because even if you are showing a page, it is a get request. Okay. Because this is our home page, we also call it as a root page. So I'll write root. Okay. So what it means is that if this URL, which is the root URL, which is equals to this, if that gets hit, we have to make sure which controller we have to use. So I'll use home controller, and in that I'll mention index. Okay. I'll explain you everything in this, but for now you can understand this is the path of our page, which is this localhost. Home is the controller and index is the definition or index, definition or action. Okay. So let's try to see how it comes in action. I've said home is the controller, so you'll have to create that controller, right? And if I'm telling controller in general, it is not a JavaScript controller, it is a Ruby controller. Okay. If it is a JavaScript controller, I will explicitly mention it. So let's create a new file and we'll have to name it home underscore controller dot rb. Okay. Class home controller, and it will extend application controller end. Okay. So by using this home, we are able to match with this home controller. Okay. That's how mapping works. That's why I did mention that in Rails, convention is more important. So if you have written home here, it will automatically map with this home underscore controller is important. So home, it will automatically map with that. And based on that, class name will also get mapped. Okay. Now second part, which is the index. Okay. What about that? So for that, as I mentioned, it is a definition or an action, you can say. So definition, index, end. Okay. It has nothing right now, but I have just created an empty definition or method or function. You can relate to those things. Okay. Now, so if we compare it with MVC architecture, the basic work has been done, which is, where is this MVC architecture? This one. Which is if the browser hits a URL, which is root in our case, the controller will get identified. Which controller? Because in root we have mentioned home index. So it will go to home index. So it has been done. Now we have to worry about which view it will show. So again, there is convention. The view will be related to home, related to index. But how will it relate? For that, we have to go to views. I'm not talking about layouts, I'm talking about views. In that, you will have to create a folder called home. Again, matching with your controller name. Okay, this is the key. Okay, and check the hierarchy correctly. It's directly inside views. And inside this, I'll create a file called index.html.erb. Hello world. Okay. So because it's again a home controller, it will automatically get mapped. And because this index definition and index file we have mentioned, it automatically gets mapped. Okay. Now let's try to refresh and you can see hello world. How does it happen? As soon as we refresh, the browser knows that they have to use this URL. For this URL, we have a home controller. It goes to home controller. Inside that, we have index definition. It goes to index definition. Now, by default, Rails will try to identify a template for this. Where will it look? It knows that it should be in views as a name of controller, which is home. And inside that, there should be a file called index.html.erb. That's how it has worked, right? Now let's try to create our own custom something. So I'll use /quiz. Okay. No get, nothing is available. So again, I will have to create a route. So what I'll do is it is actually get only. Okay. Let me show it to you. It is equivalent to get only. In this case, I'll have to write it as / which is our root URL and map it to home #index. Okay. The only thing different here is that because it is a /, it is a root URL, and that's why they have made it simple that if it is a root, which happens only once, you can simplify it and use it like simply this entire thing can go away and use it like root. That's it. Okay, but as I mentioned, we have to use quiz. Sorry, not double quiz, but quiz. So I will have to use get, similar to what I did earlier. Get /quiz, comma. Now I'll have to create a controller for this. So for now, I'll directly mention that name. Quiz hash. I can use index actually. Okay. So let's create this controller. Now there is another way of creating this controller. Let's see that way. I'll open a new tab. In Rails, we have generators. Okay. You can easily go to Rails G and it will give you a list of generators. Okay, it can generate all these things that I've mentioned, but I want to generate a controller. As I mentioned that there should be a controller for this URL, right? So let's try to generate this Rails G controller, but I don't know what all things I have to use. So again, underscore, and it will give us all the commands description, how it works. I used Rails G controller. Now it is showing, sorry. Now it is showing that you can use this command Rails generate means G controller. You have to name the controller name and mention actions. Okay. For example, they haven't mentioned example. Okay. This example they have mentioned it. Okay. But I think here bracket is important. It's an array. So what we will do is clear Rails. Either you can write generator or simple G. We have to generate a controller. The name of the controller should be quiz, or you can mention it in capital, whichever one you want. I'll mention a small quiz and then actions. So there can be multiple functions, multiple definition or action, whatever. All these things are synonyms basically. Index. Okay, index is not found. So this one, yes. Now let's see. It has generated views, helpers and everything actually. If we go to quiz, index is there, great. It has generated a helper file also, but we don't need it, so I'll delete it. Okay. And it has already created a folder quiz. Inside that, it has created index. Okay. And it has mentioned a couple of things. Now refresh and you can see this. Okay. Now, similar to this, try out something for yourself also. For example, you can write users. Okay. Now, there is one interesting thing here. What I can do is, I can go to my route and mention this quiz, but I can map it to home quiz. Okay. Now, what it means is that I will have to go to home controller, and inside that, I will have to create a quiz. Let's see if it works. By the way, when we use the controller, this is what they generated. Okay. That was the short form. I don't normally prefer short form, so I'll write /quiz to quiz slash in hash index. Okay, and yes, we can still use it. But I'll wait. Let me get rid of that. Refresh. Now what I will do is I'll comment this one, go to home controller, and create a definition called quiz. Will it work? At this point, will it work? No, it should not. Why? Because we haven't created a view. So how can I create this view? I can go to home, and inside that, I can create a new file called quiz.html.erp. It is blank, and you can see. So if you see this entire thing, you just have to remember three things. Route gets mapped to controller then gets mapped to index. Okay, so three things. We have this MVC architecture. Similar to that, you can remember RVC. MVC, RVC. R is for routes, V is for view, C is for controller. You have to create views, you have to create controllers. Okay. In routes also, you are mentioning two things. In routes, you are technically mentioning three things. One is the URL, controller, definition. In controller, you are mentioning two things. Obviously, the controller name and then the definition. And in views also, you are mentioning two things, controller folder name and the definition. So overall, it's actually easy. It's just that you need to create a couple of things. So just randomly create some URL, for example, quiz, profile. Okay, it should go to profile for controller and then index page. Okay, you can create any page in this. Index is something which is common. I'll explain you later when we actually implement bigger things. But yeah, you can experiment basically. So now let's again go to home folder and let's get rid of all the things that we don't need actually. So I'll get rid of these right for now. We don't need them. Quiz folder, let's get rid of this. We don't need this. Quiz.html file, we don't need this. And if we go to home, we don't need this. Great. Okay. Refresh, it's working. Now what I will do is along with this basic understanding, I'll integrate Tailwind CSS in this project so that we can use it for designing in future. Okay, so for that, simply search Tailwind CSS Rails. We have already created the project. Let's add this. So for that, I'll stop the server. Clear. Bundle install Tailwind CSS Rails. It will make changes to our gem file also. You can see Tailwind is getting added here. So you could have directly added here or you could have used that command also. Now let's install this. You can use bin / and all those commands. I prefer using simply this Rails Tailwind CSS install. Now we are installing this library. Once that gets installed, there will be a Tailwind config JS file. Okay. In that, we just have to copy this entire thing and paste it. Config. We have to go to config folder, go to Tailwind, and we already have this. Paste. Yes. Anything else? Yes. Application Tailwind CSS. Great. So let's go to assets style. We already have this. Great. Now we can use bin /dev. Till this point, we were using one command, which is Rails server, okay, to start the website. Let's try to use that and see what's wrong with that, okay. To check this, actually, I will have to copy this, okay, and go to my view, which is views index. Okay. Now, technically, what it means is it should be bold, it should be large text, and it should have an underline, right? Now, let me run our server using Rails S. And let's check this. You'll notice there are certain changes, but the font is changed and all those basic things have changed, but there is no underline. Okay. Why so? Because what happens is when you're using Tailwind, Rails server, when we are using Rails server, it will just run Rails project. It will just build the Rails project. It won't work for Tailwind CSS. Okay. Now for Tailwind CSS, you have to run that also, right? For that, what we have is something called as bin /dev, which means bin has a script called dev. Now, if we open this script, at the same time, I will open our Rails script also. Options. Okay. So if we open simple Rails server, what it does is it will just run our server. Okay. And it will run all the, build all the Ruby and Rails related code. But if we do bin/dev, it will definitely work for the Rails. Plus, it will uh, build our CSS, Tailwind CSS, and show results accordingly. So bin/dev is much more better, or you can say script to run our Rails server. Most of the bigger projects will use bin/dev only. Rails server is something that you do when you are working purely with Rails. Right now, we are working with Rails and JavaScript and Tailwind and all those things. So it's better to use bin/dev. Okay. Obviously, from start, you cannot use it because this dev is a script which should be available in this. Right now, it was not available before this. We have added Tailwind CSS, and because of that, it has been set up in our project. So now, if we run this command, bin/dev, now you will see. Refresh, and you can see the font is bold, it is bigger, and it has an underline, right? So that's the main advantage. Okay, so basically you can understand this in two parts. If you are using Rails server, it will just run build the Rails project, nothing to do with Tailwind CSS. If you are using bin/dev, it will build the Rails project, but it will also build the Tailwind CSS classes to correct CSS and work accordingly. So we need both of these things, and that's why we are using bin/dev. Okay, so basic setup has been done. I think I can improve on this because I don't want this padding margin and all those things from the start. So I can go to assets, style sheet, here, here. Okay. Maybe views, layouts, application. Yes, this container is there. So let's get rid of this yield. Okay. By the way, you can go to my Ruby crash course project in my video to understand Ruby on Rails and basically yield. What this yield does is that we were seeing that quiz was rendering the separate template, home is rendering this separate template. So what it means is that this entire code, whatever is written in this page, will get copied in place of yield. That's a very simple explanation of this. For detail, you can go to my Rails Ruby crash course basically. Okay. So we have done the basic setup, and in next one we can actually start developing something really working towards our project. Okay. So before we go into that, how I want to create this is we will have questions. No, we will have quizzes. In that we will have questions, and each question can have multiple answers, either 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll see how we want to manage that, and there will be user profiles and scores and all those things. So what I want to do is I just want to create quizzes for now. Okay, so we'll just focus on working with the quiz part, then we will integrate the user profile later on. Okay, obviously it will be a bit complicated, but it would be a better way to learn things. So that's it for now. Thank you. Do leave a like, comment, share, subscribe. Thank you. Bye.